Good evening, everyone. I'm Amy Woods, the Executive Director of Alumni Relations at Marist and a graduate from the class in 1997. We're very excited to present this webinar to you this evening with Dr. Helen Rothberg, and tonight's presentation is entitled Bird's Eye View, which will include the recipe for the switch, which can be made as a mocktail or a cocktail. If you encounter any audio issues, you do have the option to dial in by telephone. We will provide that information in the chat box. Due to the number of participants, we have muted all lines except for mine and Helen's. We're going to reserve the chat option of WebEx for any technical questions you might have for the staff who are listening in. So please do not send any private chat messages to Helen, as she won't see them. If you do have questions for Helen, please use the Q&A feature and direct your questions to the host. That way I can provide them to Helen. There are several ways you can view this presentation, but Helen will not be using slides. So the recommended way to view is called active speaker view. So if you hover above the top right of the video portion of your screen, you'll get a few little icons, and just choose the one that says active speaker view. I mean, you can't go wrong with any of them, but that's typically the best view. There will be a brief survey on your screen at the conclusion of the webinar with 5 questions. It's very helpful if you could fill those out for us for our future planning. And now I'd like to introduce Helen. Dr. Helen Rothberg is a professor of strategy at Marist. In addition to her professorship at Marist College, Professor Rothberg is senior faculty at the Academy of Competitive Intelligence and is principal of H&R Associates. She has published extensively with Scott Erickson on topics including competitive intelligence, intellectual capital management, and knowledge management. Helen's latest book, The Perfect Mix, Everything I know about leadership I learned as a bartender, was published by Simon & Schuster in 2017 and is now in its 2nd printing. With Scott Erickson, she has also published Intelligence in Action, Strategically Managing Knowledge Assets by Palgrave Macmillan in 2012, and Knowledge to Intelligence, Building Advantage in the Next Economy by Elsevier in 2005. Helen, thank you very much in advance for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And just one little correction there. We are now in our 3rd printing of The Perfect Mix.
Yeah. Very exciting.
So hi, Red Foxes. Hi, friends. Great to see you. Glad you could join on this beautiful Wednesday tonight. And also thank you again to Amy Woods and Donna Feldman, the alumni relations people, for being so generous and gracious in inviting me to be able to share some time with you in this way. Remember your school, and if you can, remember it with a donation at some point, if possible, toward the Needy Student Fund. So with that, let's talk about vision. So Wednesday Wisdom Live is following the model of The Perfect Mix, the advice model, that little yellow book up there. And the model is about leading yourself. And just as a reminder, the A in the model stands for action, doing more and saying less. We spoke about that in WWL1 and talked about perspective. The D in advice is about determination, which was last week, where we talked about how do you really create intention? Are you going to really see things through with creativity and ingenuity in a proactive way or a reactive way, hopefully never radioactive? Tonight, we're going to talk about vision, about seeing where you want to go. The rest of the advice model, I, is for integrity, tell the truth and no drama. So next week, we'll be speaking about integrity, and the name of that episode will be called The Best Policy, followed by communication, the C in advice, create meaning, and E, empathy. Spoiler alert, when we talk about empathy, it'll be a total comfort drink and need something like a blender. Okay, so I had some really good questions last week from you guys, and it really made me think about what you're experiencing during this challenging time. And many of the questions I was asked was around how do you pivot, which is sort of being responded to every week this week in a different way. but also about how do you create your narrative and how do you rethink what you want to do next, and how do you step away from something you're doing if you don't like it in this time period, and try to find something else. And I gave that a lot of thought, and I decided that tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how to really think about your vision and what you could be doing to help yourself identify your vision and get to your vision. So first, some fundamentals. You know, some of us might have a question or a desire or a big dream that's so real and rich we can actually taste it. And if that's the case, then you sort of know what your vision might be, and you could begin to craft a statement about it. And if that's too hard, you can ask yourself, if there was somebody in history or in entertainment or in my life, is there someone from the past or the present who I really admire, who, if they were going to represent me as a brand, they would be representing me? Who would that be? And when you think about that person, and it could be lofty like Gandhi, it could be homespun like your grandparent, think about why. What is it about that person that makes you want to be like them? And that's how you begin to start tasting what your vision might be. The next question you want to ask yourself is, am I managing myself or leading myself? The whole purpose of the advice model is to lead yourself. Because when you lead yourself, you then are in a position to lead your community and your family and others to achieve great things. And if you're managing yourself, you're not leading yourself. It's like the difference between sight and vision. When you manage yourself, and management, for those of you who might be business majors, is planning and organizing and controlling and communicating. But management is really about getting tasks done, about putting one foot in front of the other and marching forward and accomplishing things and being able to report back to things and measure things and to tell people what to do. Management sometimes comes with some amount of power. Whether you are a manager of others, you get to review them. If you're being managed by others, you are being reviewed and they have power over you. But management is really task related. It's like seeing. What is sight? There's something in front of you. You look at it and you say, oh, here's a bottle of elderberry syrup. I know that's elderberry syrup. It's clear, it's concrete, it's something you could wrap your hands around. Leadership is different. Leadership comes from the way you conduct yourself. And leadership comes from not having power over people. That's management. Leadership comes from permission. People follow you because they believe in what you believe in, or they relate to what you represent, or they buy into your vision, with vision being coming from the heart and the mind. Vision is about where you want to get to, and then strategy and goals and managing are all the ways you might get there. But what do you see as possible for yourself, for the people you work with, you lead, for your family, for your community, for your nation? What is possible for you tomorrow, the next week, the next year, 5 years, 10 years? Where is it that you're moving toward? What is your true north? Because when you have that, when you understand that true north, when you move from sight to vision, from managing to leading yourself, then you can do things in a very determined, deliberate, intuitive way, where you know what's next, or you at least could make better choices about where you're going and the decisions that you make. That's all the things that leadership can provide you. I quoted this last week, Proverbs, without vision, the people will perish. Many of us like to know what we're reaching for, as opposed to just putting one foot in front of the other. Some of us want to know where the end of that road might be and what might be at the end of that road. I'm going to quote Carl Jung here because he has a beautiful understanding of what vision is. Carl Jung, very famous archetype psychologist. Your vision will become clearer only when you look into your own heart. If you look outside of yourself, you'll have dreams. But if you look inside of yourself, you will be awakened. And that's what a vision can do. It can awaken you. So how do we go about finding our vision? Well, you could do the exercise of, who would I want to be like? Or you could begin to ask yourself questions about your values and your needs. They're very different. Needs are fundamental to your emotional well-being. Needs are what drive you and will create a response. And there are many models out there about needs. There's a model by Maslow, which some of you might know, where he talks about a hierarchy of needs, right? There's a need for food and safety and security, and then the need for connecting and companionship, and then a need for love and affiliation, and then the need for self-esteem and feeling good about yourself, and then the need for self-actualization, reaching for something bigger than yourself. There's Tony Robbins has a model of needs, and there are psychological models of needs. McClellan talks about the need for achievement, being able to keep going forward and consistently make goals and achieve those goals. There are needs for security, much like Maslow, to be safe and secure. There are needs for affiliation, to be loved, to belong, to be part of community. And what all these models have, and they all have different words and different methods for it. Tony Robbins talks about the need of your person and the need of your spirit, but they're all really talking about the same thing, those fundamental parts of you that are going to make you feel right about yourself. Values are a little different. Values are the things you believe that are going to help you make decisions. It's a bit more cognitive and a bit more intellectual. And I started making a list of all kinds of values, and you could actually go onto the Google God and ask for lists of values, and you'll get lists from the 3 core fundamental values to hundreds of them. But just to give you an idea of what values might be, there are things like authenticity, autonomy, balance, beauty, compassion, challenge, creativity, determination, fairness, curiosity, justice, kindness, love, learning, meaningful work, peace, recognition, religion, spirituality, security, respect, stability, trustworthiness, status, wisdom, wealth. There are all different kinds of values. And just as true as a need, whatever you need, that's yours. There's no right or wrong need. And whatever you value, that's yours. There's no right or wrong values. They are yours. And your values are going to drive your actions. So in thinking about this, about myself, what is my really most fundamental need? And for some of you who know me, this might surprise you a little bit, but my fundamental need is the need for security. I come from a family that was loving and did their best. But there certainly was an extra. So I know I'm my own safety net, and I've known that for a really long time. We never wanted for anything. When we needed to leave the public schools because they were on strike for a month, and we went to a private Jewish school called a small yeshiva, our dad took the second job. And then when we needed braces, he took a third job. We never needed for anything, but we also grew up with that sense that there wasn't going to be a lot of extra. And so when I got to different points in my life where I had to decide what I was going to do, am I going to be a full-time professor or am I going to be a consultant? The professorship, part of the draw for me, not the total draw, it turned out I loved it and I related to it, and it wound up fulfilling almost all of my values, which I'll talk about in a moment. But it fulfilled my need for security. Every 2 weeks, the check will be there. I know what it looks like. I'll have health insurance. That's really fundamental to me. I also could have been a full-time consultant. I was doing a lot of my own work already. I could have started my own practice. I was invited by some other larger companies to join them. But you never really knew what you were going to earn. When you consult, it's feast or famine, much like any person who owns their own business. And that uncertainty was hard for me to manage. That wasn't good for me. My values, on the other hand, and some of them might sound like they're exactly opposite of what my primary driving need was. But my values, my number one value is freedom. I value freedom more than earnings. I value my time more than money. Other things that I value down to my core is honesty, is about being authentic and telling the truth. I don't know how to do anything halfway. If I'm going to show up and teach a class, it's going to be everything I have. If I'm going to be your friend, I'm going to love you with everything I have. If you're going to ask me an opinion, I'm going to tell you the truth, which is my third core value, right? Honesty, truth, and connecting in an honest way to build community. These are really important to me. So when you put these things together, they seem really opposite. Then I value freedom and I need security. And what brings them together is vision. The thing that unites your needs and your values into a vision, vision is the switch. Vision is the switch that helps turn on the light. Oftentimes when you're managing yourself, you might feel as if you're almost in the darkness. Maybe you're working a job because it was the first job you were ever offered, and you're afraid of not making your bills, so you took that job. Or maybe you're afraid if you leave that job, there won't be something else for you. Or maybe for some reason you've lost your way at your job and you don't think you're really good enough to find the next job. That's the darkness. Leadership, self-leadership is the switch that turns on the light. It says you can have a vision. What do you really need? And what do you really value? And so that's the next thing I'm going to recommend that you do. So the first thing is, if you have a vision, articulate it. If not, think about some person who you admire and what you admire about them. And that might help you back into your own needs and values. And ask yourself, what do I really need? What do I really value to have a full life? And then create a vision for trying to get there. That's leading yourself. So what is my vision? What was my vision? What is always my vision? My vision is to always sort of be a 12-year-old in a way. I want to be active. That's another one of my core needs. I'm very kinetic. I have to be able to move around. I have to be physical. And when, as I said last week, when it's 75 and sunny, I need to go out and play as if I'm still in camp. My favorite job I ever had. These are important things for me. This helped me drive a vision of what can I do where I can really help others, because that's a core value of mine, where I can have freedom of time, and where I could have some freedom in the summer in particular. So consulting, teaching, it really seemed like becoming a professor was going to fulfill more of my core needs. But back to what we should be doing. The next thing you want to do after you identify your core needs and values is what I call a vision SWAT. Now, I have done vision SWATs with brands, with associations, with people, with major organizations. If you're interested in what that looks like and how to do it, you could find me on LinkedIn and I'd be happy to share that with you. But it's a methodology that's very powerful, because once you understand what you want to strive for, because it fulfills your needs and it's in alignment with your values, you then could look at yourself and say, S, strength. What is it about me that's in support of fulfilling this vision? And one thing I knew would support fulfilling my vision of having freedom and being able to help bring people to other places is I'm able to get along pretty well with people. I love to learn. Learning is one of my core values. I know I talk a lot, but Robin Torres once said this to me from our Emerging Leaders program: we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. I like to spend more time listening. That's how I learn. And as long as you're alive, friends, you're going to keep learning. And that learning is knowledge, and that knowledge gives you the courage to go to what's next. Other strengths, I know I could work well within a system. I always have. I knew I loved teaching. I had my first actual taste of teaching a class when I was in 8th grade. So my brother Russell and I went to this small little school, and in 8th grade we had 11 people in our graduating class. Got an amazing education there. And one day the 3rd grade teacher didn't show up, and the person running the school came in and handed me the lesson plan and said, "Okay, Rothberg, go teach them." And I loved it. It was like being a camp counselor. It was about how do you look at something that might be complex for someone else and make it really easier for them to understand, right? So I knew I had some of these strengths. I knew I had some weaknesses. I needed more education. I needed to understand what I might want to be teaching, and that kind of found me as I went. I also knew that it was going to take a while, and sometimes I'm not the most patient person. And I had to realize that even though I had one view of what getting a PhD would be, thinking and learning like the Dead Poets Society, I soon learned it was persistence and humility, and I had to make that adaptation. So we adjust our weaknesses as we go. We can fill in those blanks because I knew what I wanted to achieve. I knew what was leading my choices and my decisions. Opportunities, well, CUNY education was free, and I got into graduate school, and they didn't have many women in business, and I was able to wiggle my way into that program. And strategy became a growing field, and women were slowly starting to slam open some doors and walk into companies and work in jobs they never had before. What were the threats and the challenges? There weren't a lot of women like me, and I was also getting degreed in behavioral science because I thought you had to put them together. And it's also possible you're not going to be able to find people who will believe you know anything, which is why I worked at so many different jobs in so many different industries and did so many different internships to try and build the credibility that I could do this. I could do what I wanted to do. And so every step of the way, I asked myself, what do I need? I need to feel secure. So I kept working while I went to school. Even though college and graduate school were free for me, I still had to pay to live and eat, and that was my bartending career. I knew I wanted freedom of my time, and in the summers during graduate school, I would travel. I knew that I valued learning, and I value ideas, and I value honesty, and all of that felt like teaching on the college level was the right place. And I also value building community. And what better place to build a community than in your classroom? So you do this kind of SWAT for yourself. And what begins to happen as you move through those strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and challenges, as you really assess what's in your control, the strengths and weaknesses, and what's outside of your control, the opportunities and challenges, you could begin to chart a pathway for achieving your vision. And then you know what actions to take next and how to take those actions. And what the beauty of it is when you do it that way, when you do it from a place of light, not from self-leadership, instead of managing. So instead of putting one foot in front of the other with your head down, you're putting one foot in front of the other with your view out, and knowing that that vision came from your values and needs that you threw on that switch, you then could begin to walk toward that path in the light that will give you joy every day when you wake up to go to work. You know, Mark Twain said, if you do what you love, you'll never work another day in your life. We said something like that. And when you begin to work towards something bigger that's more fulfilling, The light at the end of the tunnel no longer feels like an oncoming train. It's just the light. So before we move to our cocktail, I'd like to share one more quote with you from a brilliant philosopher. And he said, "None but ourselves can free our own mind." Bob Marley. And that, my friends, is what vision is all about. So tonight, we are going to make a switch. We're going to switch on that light so we could take ourselves to where we want to be. And I just gave you a framework you can use to try to get yourself there. So let's begin with Italian lemon ices. I love Luigi's. I don't think any home should ever be without Italian lemon ices. And mine actually melted in the last half hour that we've been chatting. So it's easier to put, I put 2 really good dollops of it into your glass. If you have a little water handy, put some of that in there too. The reason no one should ever be without Italian lemon ices is not only is it a palate cleanser, but you know, when you do this kind of vision work and you start thinking about how am I going to reinvent myself? Who do I really want to be next? What really makes my heart sing? It could give you a headache. You could almost feel hungover. And I learned from my dad, Mickey Rothberg, the best way to cure a hangover is Italian lemon ices. Don't know why it works that way, but it works that way. So you should always have these on hand. Rosemary, whether you have it dried or a sprig, I grow rosemary all year. Not only is it a beautiful aromatic, but rosemary really helps engage the brain. It's really, really good for brain function. Some naturalists think it can help guard against dementia. Put that in and let it sit a while and swirl. Then take your raspberry. Now so either my dog or my cat ate the raspberries, so I had to go with a strawberry tonight. But what happens when you drop a fruit right in there? You know, vision has to be clear. And before you put that fruit in, you had a very clear liquid here. And then all of a sudden you get your aha and you see where you want to go, and it's sweet and it's enlivening. And that's what the fruit will be. And if you just let that sit there, you could either mash it into your drink or you could let it diffuse into your drink. Or at the end of your drink, you could take a bite out of it and it will have taken on the essence of everything else in your glass. Elderberry. So I was asked earlier by Amy Woods, is it like the elderberry and the gummies, vitamins? It is, and if that's all you have, certainly you can liquidate one of those, but our little farm store sells elderberry syrup. You can also get an elderberry syrup from a health food store. You could get it online. And the beauty of elderberry is it's really good for your respiratory system. If you have a cough, if you have a cold, if you have allergies in this time of COVID, not a bad preventative. It also tastes delicious. And it also has the opportunity to transform, take a little splash, your vision into something else that's deeper and richer than you ever could have imagined. And why does that happen? Because you're leading yourself to fulfill your own true needs and core values. Now, if you're keeping it a mocktail, I'd let that sit a little bit. And if you want to make it colder, you can add some ice, you can add some water. Being a Rothberg, this is, part of our lives. I'm going to splash mine with a little bit of vodka here. And I toast you, my friends. Cheers. Cheers to turning on the light. Wish you well. It's pretty yummy. So if anybody has anything in the Q&A, we're happy to entertain that. If not, I'll remind you that next week our title is The Best Policy. It's going to be the most simple of all of our cocktails, and I'll have a description for that for you shortly. So anything, Amy, coming in over the wire?
Not yes, but I do have a question. So you mentioned feeling you needed to get further education, right, before going forward. And you mentioned the program you enrolled in at CUNY and the strategy, correct? And you said that it was still kind of new for women. I don't know if it was a new program in general, but how did you know to take a gamble on that? You know, and
It's a great question. Well, it kind of found me because at first I was only taking behavioral science and management. And when I was still getting my MBA, I saw this thing called strategy that they started to teach. So I took a class and I felt as if I finally had jumped into the pool that was my temperature. It made so much sense to me. And the newness of it wasn't just new to women, it was new to everybody. I was the first year they graduated PhDs in strategy, and that was 1989. Strategy is a newish field. So, and did I take a gamble? I did. But you know what? I have either wisely or foolishly stepped into many gambles across my life that I just knew I would figure out. Whether it was going to Europe with Let's Go Europe, $20 a day in my pocket and not having a plan and just having a backpack, or it was, I'm going to figure this out and see how I can make it work. That's where the persistence and humility came in, because I had no idea what I was getting into, but it felt right. It felt like that boot you put on that you wore your whole life and had lost in the closet.
we do have a question that was submitted. How do you let go of your fear of not meeting your needs while trying to reach your vision?
So that's a really great question. And it depends what your need is, right? So if your need is for affiliation and love and companionship, do you have to postpone that to a certain degree while you're trying to fulfill your vision? You kind of do. You know, sometimes when you have to dedicate yourself to something really big, other things have to wait. But sometimes, if you have the right people around you, they'll support you. If you're afraid you're not going to eat, you know, there's a lot of things you can do. You can choose to say, okay, this vision isn't going to be a 3-year vision. It might be an 8-year vision or a 5-year vision, and I'm going to keep working and work on this new skill part-time, or I'm going to create this new capability for myself part-time. Or you might take a leap. It's who you are and what your other needs are and how they really interact with your values, how you manage that fear. But you know what? You know, I tell this to my classes all the time. The biggest thing to fear is yourself. So if you get out of your own way and you trust the universe, and that the universe, I'm a spiritual person, it's one of my values, that if you do the hard work and you're clear and your intentions are pure, that things will open for you that you never imagined. You know, there's that old adage that one door has to close before another door opens. And sometimes it is a leap of faith.
So when
a little crazy.
So when so much is uncertain these days, how can we best identify the opportunities and threats facing us?
Okay, good. So the opportunities and threats really are determined by your vision. So my first answer to that is it all depends. It all depends on what it is you want to achieve next and what career path or human person path you want to take next. And once you understand that perspective, you could then look at the environment differently. So hypothetically, let's say you really want to go into a creative field, brand building, for lack of a better term. Well, if you've been, and many of us have been going like this in front of a screen now for 3 months, right? You see all this new media, you see all these new commercials. We know there's a lot of things changing socially in our communities, in our country. There's going to be a lot of communication around that. This is a good time to begin to think about how to step in there. And sometimes, you know, chapter 1 in The Perfect Mix is about doing more and saying less. Sometimes you have to volunteer to do something for free to prove that you can do it. So you might have to intern. You might have to volunteer hours somewhere where you could meet the right network of people. But you can't really assess opportunities and threats outside of what it is you're trying to do. So just be really honest. And if you could get out of your own way and try to not just look at, I'm going back now to episode 1, as things being shit, that there could be fertilizer here, right? If you allow yourself that gift of dreaming, something might open that you didn't expect, and you might see something different.
Thank you. I think that's everyone who submitted. So in consideration of everyone's time, we'll wrap it up for this evening. Thank you very much, Helen, and thank you to everyone who joined us this evening for keeping the Marist Alumni Association in your lives during these troubling times. A full recording of this presentation will be available within the next couple of days on our website, which links to the Marist Alumni YouTube channel. And we do have Helen's past 2 sessions available there as well. And we will post, I think Donna will post the link to the virtual website where we house all of those recordings. And Helen will host session number 4 of her 6-session series next Wednesday, June 24th. You just read the title of the session to Donna a few minutes ago.
The best policy.
The best policy. So registration is open, I believe, Donna, correct, on the website. So you can register now. If not, I'll be ready soon. But that's all for this evening. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of the evening.
And again, to the
Cheers.
light. To the light. Cheers.
Need to get myself some lemon ice.
You do, girl.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.